Ciao friends! If you carefully look at the code that we at SQL BI write all the time, you might have noticed that whenever we use add columns to create new temporary columns in tables that we then store in variables, we prefix the name with a net symbol. The reason is to be able to quickly distinguish between columns and measures, and the at symbol is useful whenever we create temporary columns. This video, I want to show you some code in order to make you understand exactly why we came out with this standard, and I also want to show you possible alternatives that we evaluated and rejected before obtaining this as a standard. Let me show you some code and the reasoning behind our choice. This is a model that contains a couple of interesting measures. First, I want to show you ABC sales amount, which is a measure that computes the ABC sales amount, but it's not interesting as the measure. The interesting part is that you see that we are using add columns to iterate over, to add to the product table a new column that I called sales with the at symbol. And the same happens here, add columns, and I create at aggregated sales percentage. And then I use those columns this way. Now, what is the reason? Why do we use all those at symbols inside columns? In order to understand that, I want to show you another measure that does not use the same standard. It's filter sales amount. Filter sales amount computes the sales amount of products whose sales is greater than the given number. Again, it's not interesting as a measure by itself, but here I'm not using the standard. And I'm creating a new column that I call product sales amount, which I then use later. Now, the real question is product sales amount here a measure or is it a column? Over time, we came out with a standard that is extremely important to follow. That is, whenever you reference a measure, you do not use the table name in front of it. And whenever you reference a column, you always put the table name in front of it. This makes it easy to read code and quickly understand whether a reference is a column or it is a measure. Let's see that with our code. Here you see that I'm calling this sales amount because there are no table reference before the name. I know that this is a measure. But what about this? Is this a column or is it a measure? Should I write it as a column, writing product sales amount or not? It's hard to tell, and it is hard to tell because this is a temporary column that is created inside a variable. As such, I cannot use a table name in front of it. Let me show you what are the options available. But to do that, instead of looking at the code here, let me write some code in DAX Studio, because there we have a larger font and we have the option of looking at better code. Let me do an evaluate of something like a summarize columns by product brand, and we create a new calculation which is filter. I have the measure here under sales, filter sales amount. I run it, I get some result. Now, what are the options that I have in order to express filter sales amount? Let me add the definition of filter sales amount and then gain some more space. Here we can see all the options. First, in this SumX, I'm using sales quantity, which is a column. And I know that because I see sales. So I know this is a column. And net price, again, is a column. I know that because there is a table name in front of it. But when it's time to write my measure, I cannot use the same standard for this product sales amount. Because product sales amount is computing using a measure. Again, I know that because there is no table name in front of it. So I know sales amount is a measure. But what about this reference? This reference does not have a table in front of it because I cannot. There is no table that contains this column. The column is contained in sales by product, which is a variable. And I cannot write a syntax like this. It would be lovely to be able to do that, but if I try to run it, I only get an error as a result because there is no table named sales by product. So you cannot use a variable as if it was a table name to reference a column. That's why I need to avoid the table name. I have several options if I want to force a table name in front of a temporary column. One is to add the table name here. I can write here the column name as product sales amount. Look at this syntax. Product sales amount as the name of my column. And this let me reference this column as product sales amount, both here and here. Now this code is much easier to read because I can tell that this is a column, this is a column, this is a variable because it doesn't have square brackets, and this is a measure because it has a table name. If I run the code this way, it works just fine, but we still have a problem. The problem is that no such column exists. The product table does not contain the product sales amount. So I might think wrongly that this is a column in the product table, which is not. So using product here is not a brilliant idea. I can use the variable name. It's not very well known, but you can use any name here. So I can write the code this way. If I use the variable name sales by product, now you see that I can use sales by product and then product sales amount. If I run the code now, everything is working. By naming a column with a fixture's name or with a variable name, I can actually use this syntax, which is awesome. It is easy to read, but it still has a problem. The problem is that you can see it here. When I iterate over best products, I reference a variable that is in sales by product. So the name that I use here is not the same name of the table that I'm iterating. And I cannot use what I would like to do, which is write best products here. If I try to run that again, I obtain an error because I originally named the column with the variable that contained the column for the first time. So despite being really intriguing, this is not a viable option. I need to get rid of all these names, and I have another alternative, which is using an empty name. I can use just twice single quotes here, here, and here again. That is no name. I'm referencing a column. This column does belong to a table with no name. If I run it, again, I obtain a result, so the numbers are being computed. But I don't know what you think about this syntax. I honestly find it really bad to read. I don't like this idea of the double single quotes to specify a table with no name. So what we end up as our final choice was to add an @ symbol at the beginning of the variable, of the name, in order to quickly distinguish between columns that are present in the model, where it is very unlikely that you are using an @ symbol as the first character of your name, and columns created on the fly inside your code, as we are doing here. Using @product sales amount, the name is still very readable, so you don't have problem in reading and understanding the content, and it is clear that this is a column and this is a measure. So we came out with this standard that, when used consistently, makes the code easy to read. If we look back at our ABC sales amount calculation, you see that we create a new column here that is called @sales, but we typically read it just sales. Then we do other calculation, we reference a measure here, and again we know that because there's no @ symbol and there's no table name. We create another column here by using a column @sales, another column sales. I know it's a column because the @ symbol is there. And the same is happening here. I'm only referencing columns. It is important to be able to distinguish between columns and tables, columns and measures, because if you are using a column, no calculate is there, no context transition is happening. If you are using a measure, calculate is there, context transition is happening. So using this standard makes it easy to understand that this is a measure. This looks like a measure because it has no table name, but it is a column because it has the @ symbol in front of it. Now, the question is, should you use the same standard or not? You know, the answer as always is, it depends. We go crazy against these rules, in using these rules. And the reason is I spend most of the time in my day, during my day, in reading DAX code. And a lot of time, the DAX code is not even written by myself. Some customers send me DAX code and I need to read and understand it. So if the code follows standards, it is much easier for me to understand it. Otherwise, I always need to go and look at the model to understand if a reference is a measure, is a column, or whatever. So we try to use the standards as much as we can. And I can tell you that they helped us a lot in developing DAX code. So you can choose either to do as we do or to choose your own style. What is important is that you need to be able to read your code and quickly distinguish between columns, measures, and it does not matter if a column is a temporary column or a model column. Enjoy DAX!